evening, Bermuda, and welcome to another set of Bermuda Youth Connect's by-election events. My name is Haley Tier, and I'm joined by Ajay Peets tonight on this special occasion. This is the first time Bermuda will see all candidates running in this by-election on the same screen, and as we look forward to a general election, we renew and echo calls for leadership debates. Although this is not a debate tonight, it allows voters to watch all candidates together and draw comparisons ahead of the by election on October 4th. Four candidates are running in Constituency 36, triggered by the resignation of former Attorney General Kathy Lynn Simmons in August. Shortly, we'll meet our candidates, who will be introduced and then brought to the screen and given 2 minutes to introduce themselves to the public before the panel discussion begins. We encourage the audience to leave questions or comments and stick around at the end as we host a youth panel with William Campbell and Christian Chingaret from Bermuda is Love alongside Taj Donville Utterbridge.
Now let's meet the candidates running in C36. Up first, we'll have the leader of the Free Democratic Movement and former leader of the opposition, who is running in this constituency for a second time after running in 2020, capturing 25.34% of the vote, beating out the OBA's Jeff Souza, while losing to the PLP's Kathy Lynn Simmons. Please welcome on the screen for a 2-minute opening remark, the Honorable Mark Bean.
Good evening, ladies. Good evening to your listening audience. Good evening to your panelists, my opponents or competitors in the upcoming by-election for Constituency 36. Good evening to the constituents of Constituency 36, Sanders North, and good evening to the listening public island-wide and those who are listening from abroad. It is a distinct honor and privilege for me to be afforded the opportunity to be present this evening to represent the Free Democratic Movement in this upcoming by-election. We're looking forward to continuing our work on the doorstep in terms of meeting the various constituents across all 5 regions, is how we have distinguished the constituency into 5 regions, and we look forward to being able to meet everyone and to be able to express our views on the way forward to help the island help itself. This, in fact, is my second time I have had the opportunity to speak with you, lovely ladies. As you can recall, the first time you had this type of event was approximately 3.5 years ago, when you held a leadership discussion / debate between myself, the Honorable Premier David Burt, and the then opposition leader Craig Kenneneer. And it was wonderful then, and I expect it to be wonderful and edifying as well this evening. That's my opening words, and I look forward to reasoning with everyone instead of debating with anyone.
Thank you so much. Next, we have former police officer Carl Neblett from the One Bermuda Alliance running in this constituency for the first time, and the first candidate who announced their campaign in C36. Please welcome on screen for a 2-minute opening remark, Mr. Carl Neblett.
Good evening, ladies. Thank you for having me on the Youth Connect. This has been what I could consider a waiting interview. So, and of course, I'm here with the other 3 candidates who are also vying for C36. So, good evening, Bermuda. Good evening to the listening public overseas. Good evening to the OBA team that's probably listening in. And I am here to basically let the public know I am about to run for the very first time in politics, and I'm up against some veterans, Mr. Bean, and of course Mrs. Dill, and of course the other Mr. Bean I don't think has ever ran, but it will be a very interesting race moving forward. On top of that, we have some issues in C36, which I really need to look into. I've been at the doorsteps for quite a few months, and given everything that I have been told, it's there's been some neglect. But outside of not having to debate, but just hear viewpoints on what we're doing, I am here at your behest. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Neblett. Next, we have a government senator and junior minister of national security and transport from the Progressive Labour Party, who is also running in constituency 36 for the first time. Please welcome on screen for a 2-minute opening remark, the Reverend Dr. Emily Gail Dill.
Good evening to the Youth Connect and everyone watching across Bermuda and beyond. I am the Reverend Dr. Emily Gail Dill, and I am proud to be the Progressive Labour Party candidate for constituency 36, Sands North. What I want to say is how excited I am to be a part of this discussion this evening that is being put on by the youth of Bermuda. Some I know very well, and I am just delighted to see their progress and to see them being actively engaged in the political process in Bermuda. To you, the young people and others, I know that many of you feel disconnected, disengaged, and somewhat frustrated with politics. You're wondering if your voice really matters and if anyone in leadership is truly listening. But I'm here to say that I hear you and I understand the frustration. I live in this community. I have served in this community. I've taught at Sands Secondary Middle School, and I've been serving for the last 14 years as a co-pastor at Allen Temple AME Church along with my husband. I'd like to assure you that you won't just see me during election season. I've been here and I will be here with you, working alongside you long after the votes are cast and regardless of the outcome. My goal is to help bridge the gap between generations, to lessen the racial divide, to improve our quality of life as Bermudians, and to bring our community together in a way that benefits us all. I've spent years working with at-risk youth, which I know is an extreme concern throughout Bermuda. And I've helped many of them to get back on track and to stay on track. And I continue to try to work with young people to not only look for opportunities, but to also create opportunities for them to develop and for them to excel. As our party has fought for the minimum wage, annual pension increases for our seniors, lower payroll taxes, and making the tax system a bit more fair for Bermudians, increased pay for our civil servants, and we are building more affordable housing. It is my hope to be given the opportunity to fight for even more things that will ease the financial burdens, reduce the stress on your families, and give you the hope that even better days are ahead for us as Bermudians.
Dr. Dill,
yes.
We're going to have to move on. Thank you so much for your opening statement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dill. Last but not least, we have the youngest candidate for C36 at only 26 years old, a former officer of the Royal Bermuda Regiment, entering politics for the first time as an independent candidate. Please welcome on screen for a 2-minute opening remark, Lieutenant Cire Bean.
Hello, hello. Oh, good evening, legendary hosts, amazing panelists. Hope everyone's doing well on this not so dry day, but my name is Cire Bean. I'll be running as an independent in this upcoming by-election in constituency 36. I am at the ripe age of 26 years old. Yep. But just a bit of background on myself. I've started an organization when I was 17 in high school, attended the Berkeley Institute called Pay a Kid. And our main objective is to provide jobs and opportunities for the youth of Bermuda to get them out there engaged out of anti-social behavior, gang activity, and crime. And how we go about doing that is by partnering with members of the community, organizations to get them out there, skills trained, engaged in the community, and becoming productive citizens out in the community for after high school as well. I am running as an independent. I love the experience. I'm grateful to be a part of this whole experience. And I'm truly here today to engage in positive conversation. And I'm here to learn. Like, as I said, I'm 26. I'm not a veteran in this actual political space. So with there being veterans in this conversation, I do hope to soak up as much information, take on board any positive criticism, constructive criticism, and get things on the road. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you all. Now that we've heard all of the opening speeches, we're going to go ahead and enter the Q&A section of our night, which is based off of 6 topics. No one has been given these topics or questions prior to this event. And so once we finish asking each candidate these questions, we're going to go ahead and move on to the audience for questions. So to our listening audience, please send your questions in the comments section for the candidates of C36. So without further ado, our first topic of the night is crime and policing. This year has been devastating as crime has surged and reached new levels of severity as young people and young children were victims of gun violence earlier this year. Mr. Neblett, we're going to start with you as you're the only former police officer on stage, and as far as we know, the only one to call for increased police presence and budget. In a recent interview, you said, quote, "We are a British dependent territory, and if any assistance is required for us to deal with the ills of drugs and gangs, we need to look to the UK. Explain why more policing, and possibly British policing, is the answer to the surge in violence and crime."
Okay, thank you, Mr. I made mention of that. Yes, we have to recognize that we are a British overseas territory, better known as an OT. And being a British dependent territory, it's only wise that we turn to the UK, that we have done that in the past. We have had the G4S body on board here in Bermuda quite a few years ago when we ran into the very same issues that we're facing today. And that was dealing with the impact of gang crime and the escalation of crime in this beautiful island of ours. I don't know if you can recollect, maybe some of our panelists may not be aware, but at one stage, we were dubbed one of the most violent jurisdictions this side of the Western Hemisphere, even worse than Colombia. So with that said, and the fact that we have over 30 unsolved murders in this country, but yet we have a police service that has been completely depleted by numbers, 1, and by budget, 2. That in itself causes a very, very serious impact on Bermuda's society. That's first and foremost. If you don't have the manpower and the money to spend to enforce and to look out to solve crime, we have issues.
Thank you, Mr. Neblett. Going to open the floor for any comments from any of the other candidates, just if you want to respond or add to that before I move on to my next question. If not, okay, Dr. Dill, in a recent article in the Royal Gazette, you shared your concerns about the decline in morality in the community. Can you tell us what you think should be done to prevent criminal activity?
Well, certainly, I believe that in that whole, the saying that it takes a village to raise a child, and that it is important for us as a village to come together once more and to ensure that each child has what it needs in order to be able to live, to thrive, to develop. And I did speak about the decrease in morality. There was a time when most of our churches had Sunday schools, and young people would come and they would be taught, first of all, that they were loved by God and taught to love their fellow man. And I believe that that laying a sure foundation, a good, strong moral and spiritual foundation is critical in our society, and that we must not forget that. We must seek creative ways in order to be able to speak into the lives of our young people, to nurture them. There are other social ills that tend to impact our young people when they have parents that are not in the space that they need to be, that it is important for us as a community to step up and wrap our arms around them, sacrifice, and give them what they need in order to be able to thrive and survive.
Thank you, Dr. Dill. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about domestic violence, which is another huge problem in Bermuda. And this question is both for Lieutenant Bean and the Honorable Mark Bean. According to the Center Against Abuse, before gang violence, domestic abuse killings were the #1 cause of murders in Bermuda. Over 7,000 women are affected by domestic abuse in Bermuda annually. How can we begin to address this problem? And I'm going to start with Cire and then move over to Mark.
All righty. So thank you for that question. I'm not a subject matter expert when it comes to that particular topic, but what I will say is this, that we need to stop neglecting, as a country as a whole, the importance of our population's mental state. We create a negative stigma with individuals who are suffering with certain mental illnesses and problems without addressing them. We just go on about our business as these individuals are suffering. I do think that plays a part when it comes to the increase of domestic violence as well, because a lot of these individuals are calling out for help on both ends, and it's just simply being neglected. So we need to spend a lot of time into catering to supporting those individuals in that environment. So I think it starts by the re-engineering of the mindset, as well as appropriate aid and support first.
Thank you, Mr. Mark Bean.
Why we see the phenomenon of domestic abuse is nothing new. It's been in existence for as long as man, unfortunately, has walked the face of this earth. But it always comes down to one thing. If you are abusive to someone, whether it's young people or those of the opposite sex or anybody else, it's a reflection of the abuse that you suffer within. So the first step towards rectifying the issue of abusing someone is to learn to love your own self. Most of the time that we see such abuse is because the person on the opposite side, the abuser, is actually acting out on insecurities on their own part. And so that's the first step in which we can help eradicate or alleviate that abuse. There are many reasons why people might fall into such a predicament, but none is acceptable. And so if you are a young person or an elderly person or a middle-aged person, regardless of if you are a male or female, and you find yourself in that situation, then you should take the necessary steps to first separate yourself from that environment, and then find a safe space, either with a family member or someone that you can trust, and it gives you the opportunity to create that space in which you can find yourself and secure yourself. For those who need time who are suffering from such an being an abuser, well, I would encourage you to take time and reflect on your behavior and know that there's nothing new under the sun. And whatever you plant, surely you're going to reap. And there is plenty of examples of men and women who have suffered the consequences of being abusive to others.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to be moving on to another issue. And this topic is the LGBTQ rights in Bermuda. I'll be starting off with Mr. Neblett. Mr. Neblett, we're starting with you again because John Seymour recently came under fire for his comments about queer Bermudians. He said, "The blood of Jesus wasn't shed for me to sit on the sideline, to watch folly continue to be flaunted in my face. I stand on that 10 toes down," end quote. Your party leader, Jarian Richardson, responded to that and said, the OBA is not in the business of telling people what to believe. Can you respond to this and tell us what you believe about queerness in Bermuda? Is it folly, as John Seymour mentions, or are you supportive?
Okay, that's as you may be aware, Ajay, that's a very serious topic across the entire 21 square miles of our beautiful country. But one thing you have to take into consideration here is what Mr. Seymour said. That's what Mr. Seymour believes. Not everyone feels the same way as Mr. Seymour, but there are others who also feel like Mr. Seymour. We cannot tell him what to say. Where the OBA stance is concerned is that we are a group of individuals in a party, and we will have different opinions about social aspects, and in this case, the LGBTQ um, situation that currently exists on the island. This is across the world as it is. We believe in who we are as individuals, as human beings. Um, some of us will also have the religious fortitude to quote sections of the Bible that says that this is not moral. However, we cannot tell people how to live their lives. People have a choice in their lives. And if they so choose to be who they are, or profess to be who they are, that is entirely up to them. I think from a personal point of view, my concern is do not push it on other people because not everyone have that same feeling. So there are times when that gets in the way that people have to understand not everybody is accepting of it.
Thank you for your perspective, Mr. Neblett. Reverend Dill, let's bring you in on this. BIU President Chris Herbert came under fire for saying the following. Let's watch this video.
And I'm surprised that nobody, well, not I'm saying nobody, but when I heard that there was another banquet here this evening, right? I told them everyone coming to the banquet tonight. Because I didn't want to be in a part of those people. I didn't. I'm being honest. But they said, no, you're upstairs or downstairs. It's fine. I came in on the top level. I'm going back out on the top level. And I can get out the lobby and I don't need to see them. So that's fine.
Referring to the Bermuda Pride and queer people in Bermuda, he issued a joint statement accepting that his comments were offensive, yet did not issue an apology. Do you think that the BIU president should apologize, or is accepting that it was offensive enough?
I believe that it would help for him to apologize because I don't ever think it's appropriate to refer to anyone as those people. I was present at the banquet, and I'll have to be perfectly honest with you. It kind of went right over my head because I was not aware who the other group was that was having a banquet at that time. I maybe naively thought that they had double booked or something to that effect. I did not initially know that he was referencing the Pride banquet that was going on at that time. But like I said, I don't think it's ever appropriate to refer to other individuals as those people, them, and I think it's important for us to respect and, most importantly, show love to everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing those sentiments. Now moving on to Cire. Young people are particularly interested in human rights and broad advocacy for queer folk in Bermuda. What do you think about the comments from OBA candidate John Seymour and BIU President Chris Herbert?
Well, am I on right now? Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, at the end of the day, one, I want to just say I'm not one to pass judgment on anyone. Individuals are going through things in their life that may encourage them to spew out certain things that just don't align with what they either truly believe or what is a true representation of themselves. So I'm not going to judge an individual for a 30-second clip or, a tweet that took, 20 seconds to write up. What I will simply state is, so that's my thoughts on that. But what I do believe in is just respect across the board. No matter what you're advocating for, no matter what you're fighting for, respect must be there. You don't get far by disrespecting one on either opposing side. We must educate ourselves. And, being young, I'm not too far away from doing homework. So I have these discussions. I have friends of mine who are also a part of that community as well, who engage in constructive conversation, and we get the education point down of it. Because if individuals aren't properly educated, then things can run amok. So I do believe in the education component, and I do believe in respect across all boards and hearing every individual out as they are a person that lives on this earth. And that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you. Mark Bean, where does the FDM stand on this? Are you supportive of queer rights in Bermuda?
The FDM hasn't taken an official position on queer rights, as you term it. I know I have my own personal position that I can let you know in a little bit. But in terms of the party as a whole, we haven't taken a position for the simple reason that you have certain members and supporters of the FDM who subscribe to the LGBTQ plus movement. And then you have others who don't. And part of under the auspices of freedom and the freedom of one's conscience, and within the FDM, you are allowed to think and act however you like, as long as it's within the boundaries of respecting oneself and respecting others. And that's how we are helping to navigate that space. Now, for me personally, and I'm not the most politically correct person. And of course, we know that this is a topic and an issue that creates a lot of political back and forth. Okay. And I have a history of speaking on these matters long before it actually became a prominent matter in the consciousness of, or political consciousness of the people. And I still stand by the words that I said then as I do now. My position in terms of LGBTQ is people are going to live the life that they live. If you don't put it out in people's faces, whatever type of sexuality you have or you live by, I wouldn't know the difference. And I'm not going to determine my relationship or my interaction with you based on based on your sexuality or how you try to portray yourself. Now, in terms of the bigger picture of society and the argument of same-sex marriage, I am a proponent of traditional marriage. I find that one of the steps needed to restore our country socially is to strengthen the family unit. And marriage is a major component of strengthening the family unit, traditional marriage, i.e., a man and a woman and their children. If people feel that they can take another lifestyle and live that way and raise children or cultivate a family, that's on them. It's not for me to judge or determine whether they shouldn't do it or not. But based on my value system, I am a proponent of traditional marriage and the traditional family unit. And I feel that that is one of the key solutions to solving many of the social issues that we're facing in the country today.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. We're going to go ahead and begin to move on to our next topic of the night. I know we put up an audience question, but we're going to save those for the end of our conversation. But our next topic is community building. And our first question is for Cire Bean. After Sir John Swan, you're the second independent candidate to contest a by-election this year. And some have suggested that you and other independent candidates that may follow are, quote, just another party led by Sir John Swan. Respond to those concerns and explain how your connection to the former UBP premier and work with Pay a Kid has impacted you in the race.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So it was a couple of questions within that question, but I'll address them, in the stages. So independents are independents. They may pop out of the works all around the island. I don't know everyone. I do know individuals who have expressed their interest to run as an independent. That's fine and dandy. But as I said, they are independents. They are free to do as they please when it comes to representing their constituency. I'm here to solely represent constituency 36 and represent them, the people of constituency 36. Sergeant Swan, when it comes to Sergeant Swan, I've known him since I was 17, 16, and I've just gained mentorship from him when it comes to, just things in life. So I have nothing but respect for him as an individual as well. But when it comes to the point that you mentioned of community engagement, that is one of the key factors. That is one of the key things that I really want to drive home here, because we neglect the youth and we also neglect the seniors. And we need to tackle that intergenerational connectivity amongst both, because if one is not fed, then both will end up starving, if you get me. So the way of how we do that is by merging them together in a positive environment. So like what I said, with Pay a Kid, what we do is we provide jobs for students to get them out there and active, but then we also provide the link between senior citizens so they get the need and the help that they require to avoid them being neglected. So we marry the two, and then by doing that, we incorporate, or we gain a positive environment. So the conversation must be held. It's a good transfer of knowledge, wisdom, because the elders, they have wisdom that they must pass on to the younger generation. And PAKID just helps provide a bridge to, bring that gap together. So I do believe in that, because familiarity, with familiarity, it provides trust, it builds trust. And we need that in this current climate right now.
Thank you, Cire. So today I spoke to a resident of C36, and she wants to know what can be done to get back to a feeling of togetherness and community, because years ago it felt like family, people came out to help each other, and there was just a sense of togetherness. Mark Bean, what would you do to change this and get back to that past feeling?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Again, it refers back to my last statement in the former, or from the former question, and that is the traditional family unit. What is a community but a combination of various families and extended families? And so if you have a breakdown of the family unit, naturally you're going to have a breakdown of the community. And so once we identify that as the problem, then the solution is to go right back to its source and strengthen the family unit. Man need to start to be man. Women need to excel in their woman and motherhood. That is the foundation of what keeps our society together. That is our glue. Once you have that stability within yourself and within your family, then you should have the time and to give your expertise in community service. So in terms of the Somerset community, there are various institutions in which ones can contribute their service to uplifting and alleviating many of the issues that we have discussed and will discuss further in this show. The Somerset Cricket Club is not in our constituency, but in our neighboring constituency. Their influence in Somerset is unmatched, and it's not just because of cup match or a particular game, but they are embedded in our community, and you have a lot of people who serve up at Somerset Cricket Club in terms of from a coaching perspective or administrative perspective, who are there right now putting in the work to ensure that your family and your children have a safe space to be in. Likewise, we have other institutions that are available that only require a little bit more fertilizer and seeds, i.e. the efforts of us, the people, for it to flourish. You have West End Sailboat Club, which has in the past been the source of tremendous education for our young people in terms of sailing and on the water. And this was well before the America's Cup ever came to Bermuda. And that is another example of the type of institutions that are there, which can help build community bonds. Likewise, you have within our constituency, even what we call, or people are not aware, in Mangrove Bay, you have Prince Alfred Lodge, which is one of the oldest lodges in our community, island-wide. And the lodge has also served as a source of development and cultivation for young men in particular as they evolve into manhood. And so these represent an example of what is out there for us to utilize for our benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. I want to bring Mr. Neblett into the conversation. You've been quoted in an Instagram post saying that C36 is in shambles and that we must turn the community around and that there's no feeling of life in the area. How would you change this?
Number one, this goes back to what the Honorable Mark Bean has indicated. We are lacking in a lot of values that have fallen short. The family values have fallen by the wayside. There was a time, and there is a normal phrase: "We are our brother's keeper." Today, in today's Bermuda, we do not have the family support that once existed 30, 35, 40 years ago. I remember the days of the big community events back on Naval Field, now the Warren Simmons Field, where families would get together for major reunions. If that isn't community building, I don't know what isn't. Of course, the Sands Parish, as it currently stands, this is your biggest gateway into Bermuda. I think most people don't realize that. On any given weekend during the tourist season, you have anywhere between 2 and 3 major cruise ships docking in Dockyard. You're talking anywhere between 85 and 1,300 people entering from Sandys Parish. Coming through Somerset, they're now exposed to the dilapidation of buildings. The roads are atrocious. The overgrowth that is seen. Taxi drivers take tourists along the West Side Road, and here's a road that hasn't even been paved and upkept for God knows 40 years, from what I was told by a number of constituents. That's ridiculous. We pride ourselves, and Bermuda prides itself on being this really amazing tourist destination. But yet, what has happened is our community has completely broken down. Degradation wherever you look, and it comes in all forms right across the constituency. Where our elderly are concerned, there's degradation. Where our youth is concerned, there's degradation. We have all of the issues pertaining to the schools, that's degradation. The history that exists in Somerset, in Sands Parish, is paramount, but this also goes across the island. This is a very big, wide topic, and we will take up a lot of conversation just with this one topic alone. If you
Thank
have
you, Mr. Neblett. Thank you so much. Before I move on to the next question, I just want to remind everyone of their time limit. You guys have 2 minutes each person, and so once you come back on the screen and you see everyone on the screen alongside you, that means you have 10 seconds left, and it is time to wrap it up. So thank you so much for those comments. We're going to move on to Dr. Dill. This question is for you, and in your experience as a candidate in Constituency 36, and especially as a reverend and assistant pastor of AME, what do you think Constituency 36 needs?
Am I on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. It's that mic is muted. Okay. I believe that Constituency 36 needs to continue to come together. We've had the opportunity to meet so many people. And as I'm listening to Mr. Neblett, I'm wondering how much experience he really has with the Sands community, because we have an extremely rich history. The Sands community has historically led this island in many things in order to improve the quality of life for people throughout Bermuda, and they have a very, very strong family. I mean, Sands is strong. Sands is a very, very strong community, and we just need to come together even more. Uh, what's interesting is that when you're on the doorsteps and you hear people say, what most concerns you? And they say, and when they speak of the crime, and you say, are you experiencing crime? Because you, it's a relatively safe community. And they were saying, no, I'm concerned about what I hear about the crime in the community. And I want to be a part of having that erased from what we have happening in Bermuda. So I believe that as a community, we need to come together where there are issues. We need to express them. Recently at the Labor Day parade, I heard Tony Robinson from the Bermuda Entertainment Union. She said, a need unspoken is a need unmet. So it's important for us to speak about the things that are challenging us, to get together, to talk, to put our heads together, to address the issues that we are facing, and to set an example for the rest of Bermuda, because we are Somerset strong, and we will lead the way in this community.
Thank you, Dr. Dill. I just want to give you, Mr. Neblett, an opportunity to respond for 1 minute, if you'd like to.
Yes, I will. Yes, in regards to Reverend Dill's comment, just as a point of note, Reverend Dill, I worked in Somerset for well over 10 years in the capacity that I was in uniform and as a detective. I know that Sands community and Sandy's parish like the palm of my hand. What I have come to know now, coming from the opposite side, being in civilian world and now running in politics, other aspects of the community has been open to me. Something that in some cases you're blindsided by being a police officer. What I will say is I know the community extremely well. I know a lot of people in the community, and there's been a serious breakdown. You touched on it yourself when you said we need to come together more. So that is the topic for discussion, maybe in another forum when the time comes.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you so much for sharing your sentiments. Next, Bermudians are everywhere, especially on Twitter, are concerned about the increase of cost of living, including groceries, medical bills, and more. So our next topic is on the cost of the current economy. Despite being an economic empowerment zone, we've had many businesses close their doors in Somerset, such as Somerset Pharmacy, the Island Shack, and Misty's. First up for Cire Bean, what needs to be done to revitalize the Somerset business community?
Thank you very much. So, I don't believe that there's one answer that fixes all, but like I mentioned earlier, I believe it starts in the re-engineering of the mindset of the individuals within constituency 36 and island wide. When I say that, I want to address the issue of vocational training amongst the youth, because I feel that there are opportunities out there, but individuals need to be educated on how they can provide for themselves. We do understand that the government is there as basically a support system, but they are not there to just simply hand out everything to us as a community. So with that being said, I feel that if we empower the younger generation as well as the older generation to get educated and get skills trained and develop, then businesses will be coming back around in the community. They will have the skills to then say, okay, how about 5 of my mates come together, put $2,000 together, what it be, and then start up an LLC or start up a small shack that caters to the tourists that come out of Dockyard the 10,000 plus that come out the dockyard. These are ways of empowerment first. Once we empower these young individuals and the individuals of constituency 36 to then put back into the community, then the investment will come back 10 times fold. So I don't think it's simply an issue of just, oh yeah, setting up shops, setting up a building. We must start with the re-engineering of the mindset of that community.
Thank you. I would like to give Dr. Dill the same opportunity to answer this question. What do you think needs to be done to revitalize the Somerset business community?
I believe that one of the key things that we need to do is to break down whatever barriers that our entrepreneurs are facing and our business owners are facing, getting to understand what the challenges are. I was shocked, some of the places that you call, shocked and disappointed to see that they had closed down. And certainly working both with the government and other entities to ensure that they have whatever it is that they need to be able to move forward. I also I agree with Cire with regard to the vocational training and the importance of us creating apprenticeship programs for our young people to give them the skills that they need in order to be able to transition into the workforce and to remain there as productive contributors to our businesses.
Thank you, Dr. Dill. We're going to bring in the Honorable Mark Bean into this conversation because you've advocated for free market policies with less government interference. What policies or reduced policies do you think will help the business community in Somerset?
Thank you. I'm very grateful that you asked me. In fact, we do advocate market-based policies within the Free Democratic Movement because we feel that that's the best way to bring peace and prosperity in every society that it has been practiced. Now, in terms of what we can do, the first thing is to reduce government intervention, reduce government interference, reduce government taxation, and basically reduce government bureaucracy. Oftentimes, the problem that we face as entrepreneurs in the country, as you can guess, is government. Government needs to get out of the way. And so when you want to have a pro-growth environment, it's nothing that is extraordinarily brilliant to consider. There is a pathway in which you can stimulate economic growth. And that means you have to have a smaller government or a less burdensome government. You have to allow for less taxation. So when someone wants to take the risk, and they should be able to receive their reward without anyone coming in and taking a major piece of it. And we need to reduce regulations. One of the big issues, not just in our constituency, but across the island when it comes to business development, is that we have too much regulations, meaning that we have people sitting behind a desk in this country getting paid well by the taxpayer who spend too much time telling other people no. There's no way you can have progress economically in the country. There's no way we can stimulate young people or older people in our constituency to start doing for themselves, to start making money legitimately for themselves if they have bureaucratic barriers put in place, erected by people who themselves who have never ran or been successful in a business.
Thank you. This next question will be put forward for the whole panel. What needs to be done to reduce the cost of living? And I would like to give this first to Mr. Neblett.
Reduce the cost of living. Okay. Actually, I'm happy that you asked that question because only a few hours ago, I saw a YouTube video indicating Bermuda as being the highest cost of living country in the world at 113.6%. Now, when you look at our 21 square miles, Bermuda produces nothing. We import everything. Outside of international business, there's a reliance on tourism, but tourism does not give this country what it requires. Um, it's a very small percentage. How do we then go about reducing the cost of living? That's a very good question. And that's something that I'm going to have to sit down and discuss with my team with a way forward. Because at this juncture, I have no idea of how we are going to accomplish that. We are just going through the roof with our cost of living, and it's climbing every single day. So that is going to be a very serious topic for conversation.
Thank you. Same question. I would like to put this forward to Cire Bean. What needs to be done to reduce the cost of living on our island?
So I would have to say this. I can't say that there's one answer for this that fixes all of it. It's a lot of different factors that come into play when it comes into the cost of living in Bermuda. Like, for example, everything can make a shift. For a natural disaster overseas can inflict certain situations on the island, and just we are it's more than just one way. We can't just say, okay, it's the course of IB, or we can't say it's due to our set location in the Atlantic. It's comprised of all of these issues. So I do feel that it starts with not only having the conversation, but then having affirmative action to follow up with the conversation, because you have experts in that industry who very much do know the answer. So it's all good as the public and as individuals of the country to seek those answers and seek the advice of those who truly do know, because it has been fixed across other countries in the world. But from a professional and expertise level, I do not have the answer directly, but we are in conversation. You do have leading economists who have been giving me a lot of advice. So I just look forward to learning more as the time goes on. And hopefully that we can tackle this together, because it's not a one person issue. It's an island issue, and we need to have this open dialogue.
100%. Thank you so much. So for the same question, I would like to next give it to the Honorable Mark Bean. What needs to be done to reduce the cost of living on our island?
I don't think 2 minutes suffices to give you an adequate answer, but I'm going to try my best. Okay, there is a portion of the cost of living that is out of our control, and that's tied to the fact that our currency is pegged to the US dollar. So as a result, you have inflationary pressures, or the rising of prices, or the devaluation of one's currency, directly related to the fact that we have that environment in the United States. So we can't do much about that. What we can do in terms of reducing the cost of living has to be focused on each component of the cost. Take, for instance, energy. We know energy cost is through the roof. What we have proposed is the introduction of liquefied natural gas as an option or alternative to the energy problems that we are facing today. Liquefied natural gas is not only a cleaner solution, but liquefied natural gas is a cheaper solution that should and must translate into cheaper electricity costs for the average everyday citizen. Another component of expensive or high cost, again, as I alluded to earlier, is the high cost of government. Every other cost that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis is based on our own choices and decisions. If you want to spend $200 for 2 bags of groceries this week, and the next person wants to spend $400 for 4 bags of groceries this week, then that is their choice. Okay, but no one chooses voluntarily to have a high cost government, which requires you to have then higher taxation and higher regulation, and there's more money coming out of your pocket instead of going into your pocket. So there are ways in which, by having a reduced size of government, the money that you create and you make should be able to stay where it was earned, and that is with you. And so that is an example of how we can reduce the cost of living in the areas which we have the ability to do so.
Thank you. And lastly, I would like to direct this question to Dr. Dill. What needs to be done to reduce the cost of living on our island?
Wow, as my fellow panelist has said, that is a huge question. And really, after 400 years of the creation and passing of oppressive legislation, that disenfranchises a large portion of this community and elevates the financial status of others, that we are in an uphill battle. It's not a battle that just begun, but it's something that we have been dealing with for centuries. And we as a people have to come together. We see the many things that the government has done in order to address some of the more pressing challenges that we have been facing in recent years, but we must continue. They've slashed duty on essential items, and then still see that has not been passed on when in the supermarkets, et cetera. And one of the things, I'll just give one example. I'd say we must continue with tax reform. One of the things that I've seen is in terms of when we looking for housing and how the cost of housing has escalated over the years. And I'd have to go back, and I'm going to lose my 2 minutes, but I have to reference as a graduate student, I could remember at an AME annual conference when Sir John Swan was a guest, and he told us that he was going to alleviate for housing, rent control. And I remember standing on the floor as a young person and questioning him, because he said, now that we had these people coming in from international business who could afford higher rents, that we should alleviate all rent control. And so it's now created an inequitable system. His response to me at that time, because I said, well, how will Bermudians be able to survive? How will they be able to pay for these higher rents? And he said, we're going to introduce financial aid to assist Bermudians. So we've created a welfare state. And now, it's time to pay the piper. But one last thing, I say, as opposed to annual rental value, we need to be taxing individuals on actual rental value.
Thank you, Dr. Dill. Thank you, Dr. Dill. We're going to move on to our next topic of the evening, which is climate change and sustainability. According to the United Nations, climate change is defined as, quote, long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns due to natural changes and human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels like coal, gas, and oil. Honorable Mark Bean, you are up first on this because in an interview in July, you said, quote, the FDM does not subscribe to the idea of climate change. It has nothing to do with nature and everything to do with man-made politics of control. What should the government do, if anything, to encourage conservation and sustainable practices to ensure that the future needs and environment of the next generation are not compromised?
Just the fact that we're talking about long-term sustainability is all the reason why we should put it into practice, not necessarily having to have it cloaked within the political construct of climate change or environmentalism. I, for one, personally, am a deep lover of nature. I love nature. I love God's creation. Okay, I know everything you can possibly think of in terms of communing with nature and my natural environment, inclusive of human beings. But that doesn't have nothing to do with a political idea or political construct. The Free Democratic Movement does not subscribe to the idea of climate change as it's being presented. But remember this, just the fact that we have the term climate or climate means that there is change. If it weren't change in climate, it wouldn't be a climate. And so if you look at history scientifically over the decades and centuries, the temperatures have ebbed and flowed for a very long time, over centuries, as long as man has been in existence. It's got hotter, it's got cooler, etc., because life itself and nature itself is cyclical. It's not a straight line. And because of that cyclical nature, it means that you're going to have them ebb and flows, but there's nothing to be alarmed of. What is important is that we know that the climate, or actually natural resources, is the source of our edification, our food, our sustenance, and we have to coexist and respect it if it's to respect us. That has nothing to do, again, with taking steps through governmental orders or governmental mandates to force people to change their behavior as a result of what a politician thinks. People should change their behavior because it's in their best interest. And that doesn't take force or coercion, it just takes reasoning amongst people. And so they can understand what's in their best interest and they could pursue.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. Dr. Dill, you recently passed an act in the Senate that broadens the range of electric and hybrid vehicles available in Bermuda. What else can we expect from you, and what are your thoughts on the matter as it pertains to climate change and sustainability?
Well, certainly, sustainability is a very important issue. And as we face climate change, I think it's important, first of all, for us to be aggressive about our educating individuals in terms of where we are, and to certainly encourage individuals and organizations to develop a more sustainable lifestyle and to basically work together in order to address this issue that faces us. And I believe that education is key, that we must educate individuals and alert them to what is actually happening and how they can be a part of the solution.
Thank you, Dr. Dill. Lieutenant Bean, you spent months at sea in disaster relief training. What are your thoughts on this issue, and what can we expect from you if you are elected?
Well, one, I would just like to make mention that, it comes with the educational piece. On my 3 months at sea, I learned a lot. It's different demographics for all different islands, countries, things like that, different makeups geologically and things. But it's on the sense of what the Honorable Mark Bean said earlier as well. It's not, oh, this politician's idea, and then that fixes anything pertaining to climate change. It requires the education. You can't simply just leave it in the hands of an individual or a politician to just snap their fingers and say, hey, this is what I'm gonna do about it. I'm not hearing out what the experts have to say. So I do believe in the fact of taking steps to better understand it rather than just letting it pass us by, because there are things that can be overlooked that are dooming our country in that aspect. And I do understand that Bermuda is a small island, so our carbon fingerprint or footprint, whatever you want to call it, is minimum, but it does affect the wider world at the global level. So I just think it comes down to education and involving the experts about it and having this open dialogue when it comes to tackling climate change.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Mr. Neblett. What are your thoughts on the issue? And again, what can we expect from you if you are elected?
Okay, where climate change is concerned, this is a monumental topic that is actually discussed in such a humongous arena out on the international stage, and actually one very small country to the south of us, Barbados, the prime minister of that country, she is at the forefront of trying to instill in the bigger countries, the players in the bigger country, as to what they should be doing to identify all of the issues that are actually causing climate changes right across the world. This is a humongous topic, and education, more so than anything else, is one of the main key issues that we need to now press not only towards our younger folks, but everyone that lives here in Bermuda. But remember one thing: it's not only affecting Bermuda; it's affecting everywhere. So therefore, we need to actually get the education to find out what's truly happening. It's a humongous question.
Thank you so much, Mr. Neblett. As a reminder to the audience, send in your questions if you have any for our candidates. We will get to your questions at the end of the panel. Our final topic of the night is on education in Bermuda. Dr. Dill, you're up first on this. The PLP increased scholarship funding and introduced initiatives like the College Promise program. Some say that these efforts still fall short of addressing the deep-rooted barriers that Black Bermudian students face. Respond to this criticism and tell us what steps you support to ensure equitable opportunities and academic success.
Thank you. Certainly, we are working assiduously with regard to the reform of our education system, and I am delighted because I know that we have some really incredible educators in Bermuda, that we are putting our heads together and we are working to create an education system that will be the system of choice for every student in Bermuda, so that individuals are not paying taxes for school and feeling that they have to pay again for their students to go elsewhere. I want to say that one of the things, when you talk about the fact that there are still some students that are not able to have full access to fully develop, you are absolutely correct, because there are still students, when we have scholarships, there are many students who walk away who are well deserving that still are not able to afford education. So I believe that it is important for us to continue with our strategic relationships with educational institutions, continue encouraging our students to attend and maximize on what is available here. And I believe that we are also looking at things such as creating, reintroducing a guaranteed student loan program, so that every student who wants to pursue higher education has an opportunity to do so, regardless of what their family's financial situation is. And I look forward to seeing every student. And that's one of the things that has troubled me. That there are students who have incredible potential that have been denied access because of finances. And so we look forward to further addressing that issue.
All right, moving forward, next we have Cire Bean. Can you tell us your stance on school closures? As some may say that this is not true education reform.
So, being on the doorsteps of members of the constituency, everyone is still, for the majority, very much so upset on how it was handled. Now, I do understand that with the recent decision that was made, there is a period of time that we'll go through in sense of before anything is completely finalized. But with that being said, we need to look at the opportunity that is also presented ourselves. So yes, members of the constituency are fed up. They are angry at how it was handled. I have family members as well, brothers and sisters who attended Somerset Primary. But the thing is, let's look at the situation that we're dealing with right now. And now let's be proactive and constructive in dealing with it, in the sense of, yes, okay, there may be Somerset Primary may be vacant, but don't let it become a desolate building. Do not let it become vacant and unused. There are a lot of other programs, youth programs that are around that need a place to utilize, need a space of operation. So in the time frame, yes, we are dealing with that situation, but let's not condemn the building. Let's not let the building sit up and go to waste. It can be utilized. People need a space to operate. They have great initiatives. Why not let us use that building and that space right now while this whole matter is getting resolved? Because I don't simply think that closing the school is just simply the answer. But while we are finding the answer, we must utilize it to the best of our ability and make sure that it's being utilized. You cannot let that just go to waste.
Thank you. And while we still have you, I have a follow-up question for you, especially speaking to your experience with Pay a Kid. The government has laid out a comprehensive plan to support the transition of students, parents, and staff affected by closures of Gilbert Institute and Prospect Primary. Do you think any support for transition is adequate when considering the implications of unforeseen educational outcomes that will potentially affect our students in the long run?
Hmm. So, one, yes. Well, first of all, I would say that support is needed, regardless. If this the situation has come up, the support must be there. But then I also challenge the fact of how we look at education as well as a whole. I'll just put that out there because I want to bring back to the fact of the vocational skills training in the educational system at a young age. I believe that should be mandatory because, for example, you can tell a fish and a human being to run a mile. Who you think is going to win? That doesn't mean that the fish is incapable of covering that mile, but they just need to swim in the water. So we need to re-look at the educational system as a whole and ensure that it is very much so inclusive and not divided, because there's different ways of learning. There's different forms of education that people apply differently to the world. But when it comes to, like I said, the support, it is not up to me to say if it is adequate or not, but we do have to feed and source that information from the actual parents themselves who have to undergo this new change of life, a new change of living and relocation. So it's just something to look at.
Thank you. Up next, we have the Honorable Mark Payne. You've been vocal about keeping Somerset Primary and West End Primary open and strengthening Bermuda's education system. How would you propose your decentralized leadership structure for schools to improve education quality and to ensure local communities have a greater say in decision making?
How do we propose it? Well, basically, you are right. It is part of our vision for education reform because we feel that what's been presented by the current government is inadequate. And I'll take this opportunity to say to the current government that they should be ashamed of themselves because we're offering our children something that we ourselves would have never accepted when we were their age. I'll just put that on the table for once to consider. Don't offer our young people anything that we would not accept ourselves. And that's the first error in the ways of the government. And that's why we are taking a different approach. We feel that it is absolutely contrary to the idea of human development, especially social and cultural development in our country, to entertain an idea that came from God knows where to close down schools in this country in a very arbitrary manner. It doesn't make no sense. Even when they have tried to explain themselves, it has never made sense to the point that you have had backtracking as a result of resistance coming from out of the West End community. When I say West End community, I speak of Somerset as a whole and not just West End School. And now it's translated to more resistance with Somerset Primary because of that flip-flopping. Both schools deserve to be maintained and opened. And through our idea, we would move to decentralization because, for instance, West End School and Somerset Primary have enough trained professional educators that used to represent or serve and live in our community today. And they are quite capable and able and willing to serve on a board of governors that can strategically direct that school towards its express goals, alongside with giving power directly into the hands of principals and teachers. In other words, we need to get out of the way of government as government and let the professionals actually do what they are trained to do and just provide them with the guidance, right, and the initiative and the vision for us to grow our education system. That's all I'll say right now because I could get real warmed up on that topic. You know why?
Thank
Because to get it wrong means we're sacrificing our children for a whole nother generation. Yet we complain about all the issues of our youth. We have to understand that every action has a reaction. And as adults, we need to take the lead and make better decisions for our youth's well-being. And I make no apologies for saying that also.
We thank you for your passion and advocacy for Bermuda's young people. Moving on to our last question for Mr. Neblett. In 2014, the OBA slashed the number of scholarships and funding for the Department of Education. For example, funds allocated for further education awards, which have supported members of Bermuda Youth Connect, were reduced from 240,000 to 40,000. Tell us why Bermudians should trust the OBA to prioritize education when tough decisions need to be made, or such as these cuts justified.
Okay. At the time, I'm very sure at the time when these cuts were made, I was not a part of this process. I am aware of what occurred. Um, the decision to make the necessary cuts back then, I would have to really find out what was the rationale behind it, because I can't tell you. I am new to the political landscape. All I will say is, and I will concur with the Honorable Mark Bean, I think government really needs to step aside and let the principals and those who are in education make the decisions for the education system that currently exists here in Bermuda. The bottom line here is our students are the ones that are suffering. Nobody's talking about that. Um, our students are the ones that are going to be affected by any major decisions that will be made by any government, whether it's the OBA, the PLP, the FDM, or independents for that matter, on the issues that affect education across the broader spectrum of the education landscape on the island. Those are some very, very serious issues. I have children. I am sure everyone in the panel have children, and we can see the fallout from what is being caused by education. And on top of that, where parents now, and this has been going on for quite some time, where parents have to actually provide all of the resources to send their children to school. There were a lot there. I'm sorry. I know my 2 minutes is probably up, and again, this is a topic that can be discussed at length, because 2 minutes is not going to answer this question. It's not. It's a hard topic, and it has touched the minds and souls of everyone in this country, because all of our children are being affected by it.
Thank you. And I do have to cut you short, and I do apologize. I know we are running over time, panel, but if you are able to stay on, please, as we try to address the community questions. And I would like to thank you, well, give a big thank you to all of our candidates for your time, thoughts, and respectful dialogue. Now we will ask the audience questions before closing statements. Once the candidates close, we will be brought to the end of our C36 panel interview and begin the youth debrief with William, Christian, and Taj.
Thank you, Ajay. I'm going to go ahead and kick off our first question, as it is on the screen, by Ryan Robinson, Parent Chief, and he says, "Good evening. This is regarding the topics that we discussed. Our first topic, crime and crime. So regarding this topic, I would like each of the panelists to answer what they believe the root causes of crime and violence are as it relates to our community. And we can go ahead and start with Cire.
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's a lot of components to it. So one, I would say, like I always preach on the engagement with the young individuals of the community, because if you look at the statistic, it's not the older demographic that have in recent times been committing these crimes. So it's the engagement and the neglect aspect, and also it comes down to as well the educational component of it all. Because with certain individuals, say if they do acquire financial literacy and they understand how money works, they will not be engaged in these criminal activities for minimum financial compensation. So, but with that also being said, they must be engaged. If the minds are idle, then what takes place? And then also it's the economic standing of each household. Right now, we've all addressed as the panel that times are tough in Bermuda. So the young individual who's looking up to the parents and saying that, hey, I'm going to help, I'm going to make a way, I'm going to provide food on the table, they will do anything out of the just love for the parental figures to try to be a provider as well. So how do we combat that? We must give them opportunities. We must give them the vocational skills training. We must engage them in the community and stop pointing fingers. It is up to us as a collective to do so. So that is kind of targeting the root of it, in the sense of, just stop putting a band-aid on everything. We must get down to the root and support them. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Nope, thank you. Sorry to cut you off. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Mark Bean.
Thank you. The root cause. Thank you, Ryan Robinson, Parent Chief, for the question. The root cause is a lack of knowledge of self. As a man thinketh, he becometh. Right? And I'm sure the great good Reverend will verify that when asked by the learned people of his time, well, what's the fullness of the law? When asked to Jesus Christ or Jesus Christ, the answer was to love the Lord with all thy soul, heart, and mind, and in so doing, love thy neighbor as thyself. But the problem is that you cannot love what you don't know. So one of the so what we're facing is, right, in terms of crime and violence, is that our people, our young people, lack self-knowledge. And so part that self-knowledge usually gets cultivated within the family environment or family structure and or school. But in the absence of it, then you have young people basically drifting aimlessly, right, without direction of rudder or rudder. So what's important then is for us to revert to that age-old approach to developing peace within a person, and that is to ensure that they can have a meditative, calm mind, and then they can be able to relate to the environment inclusive of others. But when a person has that mental confusion within their mind, it's hard to relate to others, and that's where many of the issues come in terms of human relationships. So self-knowledge or knowledge of self will always be the fundamental solution towards peace.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. We're going to go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Dill. And you have 60 seconds. 60 seconds.
60 seconds.
We're going to, yes, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to say that with regard to the root cause of crime, certainly the breakdown in the family unit in terms of establishing the values that individuals need, and certainly creating opportunities for them so that they choose alternative life paths.
Thank you. And then last but not least, Mr. Neblett.
Okay, I also agree with the panelists, but you also have the other issues that causes crime and violence across the entire spectrum of Bermuda, and that is drugs. Drugs is a major issue that permeates all across pretty much every single family on the island. And with drugs comes with the violence, because one has to support the habits of purchasing, and this then creates a rippling effect depending on the affiliation with individuals who are in that fraternity, i.e. the gang members. It's a whole myriad of circumstances that causes crime to be where it is, and the violence that also comes with the nature of criminality.
Thank you, Mr. Neblett. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next question. We'll pass it on to Ajay.
Thank you. So this question comes from Taj down the Otterbridge. The question is, what would each candidate do on a policy/legislative level to encourage these so-called traditional family values, build a stronger community, stem violence, and ensure queer people are safe on the island? I'll hand this off to the Honorable Mark Bean first.
Well, the question is peculiar, so I'm not sure how I should approach it or answer it, because you're saying that traditional family values are so cold, so you're already bringing a bias into the conversation, and so I don't think you can expect to have something that's cordial and that's going to be able for you to relate to the answer, and then you're correlating it with building strong communities, stemming violence, and ensuring queer people are safe on the island. So you're bringing four different issues into one. It might be better if we dealt with each issue on a singular basis. So I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer that question fully, but it's clear that knowledge of self, which is cultivated at the family unit, right? Whether it's at the traditional family unit, i.e., the way that our grandparents and our great grandparents and the rest of us were raised in this country, then that goes a long way into assisting us and to alleviate many of the problems that you have identified or you would like for us to address, inclusive of a stronger community, stemming violence, and ensuring equality before the law, right, for everyone on this island, regardless of their
Thank
sexuality.
you, Mr. Bean.
Thank you. And I would like to hand this question off to Mr. Neblett next.
Yes. This is a four-pronged question. And again, it touches on four very separate topics. One or two may gel into each other. But at the end of the day, these are four questions that need completely four different responses. At the end of the day, when it comes to the policy and legislative aspect of creating such legislation, these questions will have to be discussed at length to procure all of the necessary information to put together the necessary policy and legislations. That's how I will answer this question, but it's a four-pronged question that requires a lot of response.
Thank you. I would like to turn it over to Dr. Dill.
Look at the question that has been raised, I'd have to say that we'd have to identify the core issues, and as such, the subjects that they have laid out here, these are things that at the core cannot be legislated. And I'd have to agree with the Honorable Mark Bean that it comes with an understanding of who you are, but also a respect for other individuals, and understanding who they are and protecting each other and loving each other.
Thank you.
Thank
I would like
you.
to turn it over to Mr. Cire Bean.
Okay, thank you. So what I would say is this: one, it is a multi-part question, but I will have to say this: when it comes to policy and legislative involvement, it's not simply a singular individual uh, process. It is a group process, but I just feel that we need to shift the way of how we tackle it. Rather than it coming from the top down, it needs to be brought from the bottom up. And when I say that is by involving as an independent, there's so much that I can do. But if it is the word of my constituents, then I must bring those ideas and those concerns forward, which then will start the process of developing policy and legislation to then deal with the matters that Mr. Otterbridge brought forth. But yeah, it's a multi-purpose, it's a multi-parted question, and it's going to take far more than 2 minutes just to say what we will be able to do. But like I said, bring it from the bottom up, get the information from the ground of the constituents themselves, and then bring their voices and concerns to help start with the process of policy and legislation in this matter.
Thank you. For our next audience question, it is from Omar Dill, and it says, how would you all deal with the proceeds of the corporate income tax? I'm going to pass this to Mr. Neblett. Mr. Neblett, I think you're muted. We can hear you now.
Thank you. Sorry about that. In regards to the proceeds of the corporate income tax, number one, we would need to find out what the proceeds would actually be when it comes to how much monies will be collected. Once we determine that, there are all kinds of major concerns across Bermuda that the actual income tax revenue would assist in alleviated. The healthcare system can be impacted, taking care of the island. One, the roads are atrocious. Those the roads really need to be dealt with. Um, the overgrowth that exists across the island, that's another issue. Um, Education, we cannot touch on that subject enough. Money needs to be spent on education, whether we like to admit it or not. Um, I
Thank you,
know.
Mr. Neblett. Yep, your time is up. We're going to ask and pass that question to Mr. Cire Bean. How would you deal with the proceeds of the corporate income tax?
I have a very short, simple answer. One is just like I mentioned earlier, voicing the concerns of the people, because I'm not the one with the expertise or information to dictate where in corporate income tax should be directed. We must feed that and get that information from the members, the citizens of the island. If they feel that currently right now it needs to be pushed more into the educational sector, then that's what will be done. If it needs to be put for more into the infrastructure sector of the island, and that's what will be done. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of different things that even Mr. Carl Neblett brought up. But I don't think it's just one specific area. I do feel that it needs to be evenly distributed amongst the areas of concern. But yeah, that's my understanding.
Thank you.
Another question from Taj Danville Outerbridge. If each candidate had the opportunity to bring a private member's bill to the House that would aim to benefit C36, what policy area or areas would it address? And I'll hand this over to Dr. Dill.
Okay, thank you. I think that given all of the activity that we have in the West End and the opportunities that could potentially exist with partnerships with the cruise lines, et cetera, for economic development that would benefit individuals and entrepreneurs, business owners in the SANS community might be something that we could perhaps look at.
Thank you. And now I would like to pass it over to the Honorable Mark Bean.
There are some policies that can be adjusted that are directly related to the upliftment of constituency 36. But when you're talking about bringing a private member's bill, then more than likely that private member's bill should be developed with the entire country in mind and not just one particular constituency. And so I could think of some things that we can do from a regulations perspective or even operations perspective before we get to being or discussing a private member's bill. For instance, in the West End today, you have a lot of young people who are not able to go and get their bike license because they are concerned and afraid to travel into Hamilton. Even registering to vote, okay, is a challenge because they don't like the idea of having their address being made public because it's a safety issue. So these are things that we can tackle without even having to go to Parliament to bring a private member's bill. And that's what we should do. But in terms of what Mr. Danville Outerbridge is asking, I don't think there's anything in particular that's specific that requires that type of legislation that can't be solved by regulatory change.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. We're going to move on to the next question, which is from Graham Smith. And it says, can the panelists comment on whether they think that government should be providing evening and daytime professional parenting classes for all parents who have a child under, say, 1 year, where those parents who complete all classes are paid an incentive of, say, $1,000 at the completion? I'm going to pass this first to Dr. Dill.
Whew. Well, first of all, I would believe that parents in their first year, that's a really, really challenging time in any family. So I would hope that we could look for other ways that we can support them. As we have indicated tonight, SANS as a community has wonderful individuals and older people, seniors who are able to impart knowledge, who may be willing, putting programs together to support young families, as opposed to what's the word I want? Regulating their opportunities to learn. I wouldn't.
Okay, and I'm going to pass it off to Lieutenant Bean. What do you think?
So I just want to make mention, one, I know Mr. Neblett said that the other panelists have children as well, but I'm not a parent as of yet. So, but to talk on the discussion of, parents, and I think it still boils down to the educational piece. Now, I can't say that the fixed number that you may mention of $1,000 is going to work or will be the number. I know you're just throwing out there as a suggestion, but I do feel that it is an idea that is worth looking at, because at the end of the day, it's not only the youth that need education, but it is the adults as well. So any way that we can incorporate programs that help bring up the educational component of parenting and things like that, I think that we should have a look in.
Our next question comes from Elijah Richardson. I guess there's multiple parts, but this question says, do you believe that international business in Bermuda contributes to a higher cost of living? And I will put that question forward to Mr. Neblett.
Where international business is concerned, we know that international business generates billions of dollars in our area and across the island. Bermuda has been in the international business arena for many years. Where the contributory factor to the higher cost of living is concerned, that's a very good question. We would have to look, I would really have to look to find out why the cost of living is so high and whether international business ties with causing the issue of the high cost of living in our jurisdiction.
And then I would like to pass this forward to the Honorable Mark Bean. Do you believe that international business in Bermuda contributes to a higher cost of living?
Yes, that's certainly one of the factors that contribute to a higher cost of living. I just think about housing and the upward pressures that come in the housing market as a result of the added competition for houses or living quarters from international business vis-a-vis the average everyday citizen in the country. So there's no denying that international business is a source of higher costs, but it is also a source of higher revenues. So there's a trade-off in that part, but there's no denying that that is the case. And while I'm at it and still I've got a few seconds left, I didn't get a chance to address it, the corporate income tax, and to address that idea of high cost of living. It's important to utilize that corporate income tax to reduce our debt, first and foremost. So I agree with the One Bermuda Alliance's position, but we also should take a portion to fund our social safety net. And others have spoken about those aspects of social safety net, but that's where we should use the corporate income tax to alleviate many of those problems or give us a boost into ensuring that that safety net is in place.
Thank you, Mr. Bean, for your comments. We're going to I see one more question, and this is from Long Tales and Short Stories. Do the panelists agree with the progression of the cannabis legislation and reform in Bermuda, essentially making cannabis legal to consume in public, this being done through statutory means? I'm going to pass this question on to Mr. Cire Bean.
Well, I know that this is a much debated topic in terms of Bermuda and where we're at in the legislative process of cannabis on the island. Obviously, in a lot of instances, we are behind, I would say. But at the end of the day, I don't solely believe it's what I believe. You know, if we listen to the people and what they have been advocating for and what they want, it will help us better target that question.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. And I will also hand it over to Mr. Neblett to respond.
Yeah. Where this legislation is concerned, I know it's been a burning issue for quite a number of years, and I will also concur with Mr. Bean in that Bermuda is behind when it comes to tackling this particular legislation. Again, this is a hot topic, and where it comes to the general output of the audience and the community at large, this is where we actually need to focus and find out all the necessary information to make this informed decision as to whether this path should be taken or not. That's our stance, and of course, the OBA will have to make the necessary proposition for this if this does come to fruition.
Thank you so much to all of our candidates for answering our audience questions. Now we would like to give each of you an opportunity to offer a closing statement to your constituents of C36. Please note that you only have 1 minute, and I would like to start with the Honorable Mark Bean.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank the audience for listening in, and to the constituents of 36, Sanders North. We will be continuing our canvassing across the constituency. We look forward to touching base with you and hearing your concerns, and also, if need be, provide you with some of the ideas that we have that can help alleviate the problems that we are facing in this country. Me in particular, I didn't take time to read up my resume or anything like that, because I think most of you know that I have experience in the political realm that ranges not just from being a senator, but also up to being a cabinet minister, a member of parliament, and the opposition leader. And so I will be willing and able to bring to bear that considered experience into not only assisting you at the constituency level, strengthening your families and the community, but I certainly, and you can rest assured, that I will be an effective representative of your interests in Parliament if you so choose to vote for the Free Democratic Movement.
Thank you. And next, I would like to have Lieutenant Cire Bean.
Just want to say I deeply appreciate the opportunity to be amongst the guests of the panelists, the host, all of Bermuda who's tuned in and listening right now, and also to be able to put my head forward in the ring for constituency 36. You know, I just want to say that I'm not one to get caught up in the messiness that I would deem it, or well, a lot of the communities deeming it, of party politics. I just look at trying to put the constituents first, and representing them wholeheartedly without having any other, things that block it. So I just want to say thank you very much for all the support that I've been getting on the doorstep. I will also continue to canvass, and also I do want to make a public apology due to the delay of and the postponement of the community barbecue that we were set to have today due to the bad weather. We are looking for an alternative date, possibly next week. And we want everybody to come out, get involved, no matter who you support, who you represent. This is a free event. Come and have a good time and come together as a community. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Next, I would like to have the Reverend Dr. Emily Dill.
Thank you. I just want to say to everyone watching tonight, and in particular to the Youth Connect, I want to say that this has been an honor to speak with you, to share my perspectives, and to express my commitment to constituency 36 and all of Bermuda. I just want to say to you that this election is not just about the next few weeks, but I intend to be here. It has been an absolute joy getting to know you. Constituency 36 members. If I haven't had a chance to meet you on your doorstep, I am riding the ferry every morning into Hamilton to make myself available to you. If you don't care to have a conversation at that time, you can certainly slip me a note, and I will make an effort to get in contact with you. I believe that we are a strong community. I believe that we are committed to coming together, and I look forward to working with you as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, Mr. Carl Neblett.
Yes, thank you, panels, for having me, along with all of the other proposed candidates for C36. To all of the constituents, I will be here at your disposal. I sense that there's been a lack of presence by any representative from any party in the constituency for quite a long time. Therefore, a lot of issues have cropped up. Standing at the doorstep, having conversations with constituents about all of the issues that are affecting them, young, old, and the extremely mature. I will be here. I make a promise that I will be out there every time that I am required. I answer emails, I respond to phone calls, I will make my presence known in the constituency. At the end of the day, if you select me from the One Bermuda Alliance, I can tell you one thing for sure. I will be there to act on your behalf in the House of Assembly.
Thank you all panelists for such an engaging conversation. We really appreciate you for joining us and participating in this monumental occasion where we've had all of you sharing your opinions, your thoughts in a very constructive way. We're going to now take a 3-minute break, and viewers, we encourage you to stick around for our youth debrief with Taj, William, and Christian. Once again, thank you all, and have a good evening.
We're back.
We are back.
Honestly, that was history.
It was.
We've never had
and
4 candidates in one place.
We have not, and I'm glad that we got to be a part of it. It was very interesting hearing the responses from everyone, which is why I'm super excited to welcome our youth debrief panelists to the conversation. Let's see.
Yes.
Open, here we go. We are joined by Christian Chingaret, Todd Stoneville Utterbridge, and William Campbell. How are you guys doing this evening?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Intellectually and morally stimulated, based on our discussion with the previous candidates.
That is great to hear. And so, well, we can literally just go ahead and kick it off. I want to ask just what were you guys' initial reactions on the conversation?
Well, as you mentioned before, the fact that we had 4 representations to choose from, I think that's a powerful option to give people chances. I did look at the Royal Gazette articles, though, and some people are concerned because we have so many options that might dilute it and allow certain parties who have a stronger representation to get it and break up the smaller parties who have less representation in that sort of constituency, being constituency 36.
Yeah, just echoing Christian sentiments, certainly the need for an eye towards strategic voting potentially might be something on the constituents of C36's minds. However, of course, this conversation does hinge upon their impressions of the candidates, and 2, on their expression of who they feel has got the best vision and the best meaning to effectively govern Bermuda as a representative for their constituency. We leave that to them.
Yeah, to echo similar sentiments, I think this was somewhat of a litmus test. This election can stand for somewhat of a litmus test for what we can expect to see in the general election. And it's exciting, I think, to have, for the first time in Bermuda, of real challengers, real outside parties, real third parties, independent candidates to challenge the government and the opposition and make them, improve their stances and become better politicians. I think that's really good for Bermuda and Bermudians overall.
Well,
I see the concern as well, but I definitely think it's good. I think it's better in this case than previous situations like the 2020 election where some constituencies only had one contender and it wasn't even an opportunity for people to have an opposing option.
agreed.
I think it's down to the Westminster system that we presently use, but that's in regards to another conversation later down the line if we do proportional representation, because we right now do first written around the post, and therefore some people feel it's not as good, but it's a system we have now, and that's for later discussion. But I thought I'd bring it up because someone mentioned it in the comment section.
Absolutely. So what I want us to do, we can use the games to guide our conversation for the night. So we can start first off with the comments or the conversation that our panelists had about crime and policing. I want to just open it up for any initial reactions to that topic. We talked about bringing in, possibly bringing in British police officers to deal with crime. We talked about morality in the community. And the traditional family values, traditional family structure. Taj, would you like to start?
Yeah, I can start. I think for me, the first topic kind of set the tone for the conversation. I think all we heard, well, for me personally, all I heard today was a lot of principles and kind of ideological pontifications, if you will, but I didn't hear any real policy, legislative recommendations from any candidate, to be fair. And if I was in C36, I still would not have my mind made up in terms of who I would vote for based on this alone and their statements that they've made in the past. I just didn't hear anything substantive enough. And I think that speaks to Bermuda's political system as a whole, is that we don't have high enough standards for candidates, I think, in terms of the knowledge we expect them to have, the experience we expect them to have, and kind of the ideas we expect them to have. We heard every candidate today say that they have no ideas, basically, on what we should do on several issues. They just said we have to talk to the people. my question is, what have they been doing all this time? Shouldn't they have some idea of what the people need and want to see and want to hear by now? Um, that's what I expected to hear, especially from the government and the OBA. I expected to hear pretty substantive policy recommendations, and I heard none of the sort on any topic. But in terms of gang violence, I think that was particularly interesting because what we heard a lot of was traditional family values. And I think that is so interesting. One, because that's a conservative talking point. And two, like, and I asked the question in the comments, how does that translate to a policy recommendation? How do you, as the government, encourage people from a policy perspective to portray traditional family values? I think that was what was lacking for me overall, but particularly with subject one.
If I may, I thought there was as Taj said, there were certainly a lot of indications of values that each of the candidates espoused. And that was, of course, refreshing to hear. And we'll share the sentiment as well that in some cases, I think there could have been a little bit more digging into on the hard policy specifics and what more we as a community in Bermuda can do to support resolution to these issues, but also what solutions can the residents in C36 be engaged with already. I thought that Cire Bean actually presented a little bit of a closer finger on pulse in bringing together both youth and seniors for collective socialization and for division of solutions together, and as well presented some ideas too on some aspects of infrastructure that needed look that were echoed by Mr. Neblett. But again, there is a lot really to be done. And I think it would be fantastic as well for a little bit more of the canvassing work to illustrate to the candidates what they feel specifically should be done to revitalize the community and to reduce violence as a result. As a last, I would say that the question presented by Mr. Ryan Robertson, Parent Chief, as well, did quite deeply interrogate this, and I think was indicative too of a larger question on the minds of some as to whether an idea of where these problems that are facing Bermuda and Bermudians and C36 have come from, and ask for clarity on the candidates' understanding of those issues, where they come from, and therefore too how to address them.
Absolutely. Christian, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
Again, reiterating the points made, the fact that they don't have specific details makes it difficult for us to separate each of their viewpoints, because they all talked about the same values and principles of individuality, but we didn't see specific, how do we solve this? And I understand there's a lot of things to solve, but giving specifics would be an important aspect that hasn't been seen.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So
Do you-
kind of like
Go ahead, Ajay.
kind of like segue to the next topic, because I know that this is going to be a loaded conversation. I think that this section in particular was quite telling in terms of where the aisle is across the board. So concerning the LGBTQI plus rights, just a blanket kind of idea of from each perspective from you guys is just as a whole, how do you feel about the sentiments that were shared by each of the candidates from this particular topic?
I'd be happy to go first on that question, being this is kind of my area of expertise, if you will. I think I was disappointed, to be quite frank. There's one thing to have opinions, but there's one thing to I think Bermuda has a real problem with accepting homophobia built into our culture. And I think hearing the candidates mention in the same conversation as talking about LGBTQ plus issues, mention that people have the right to have their own opinion, that LGBTQ plus people shouldn't be pushing their lifestyle in people's faces, and then to subsequent questions say that Bermuda has a deficit in morality and that Bermuda has needs to return to traditional family values, that we need a man and a woman in the household. All of those things, I think, just speak to the position in which Bermuda is in. And it's like we're living in 1990 or 1980 even. And it's really disappointing. And as an LGBTQ plus voter, I think I wouldn't be comfortable voting with any of the four candidates, to be quite frank, because none of them unabashedly said that homophobia is unacceptable in Bermuda, and that people should be held accountable for homophobic remarks, and that LGBTQ plus people deserve to be safe in the country and live as they so choose. I didn't hear that from anyone. All I heard from them was that people are entitled to their opinions. Well, I see, and many agree, that homophobia is not an opinion. It's harassment and it's discrimination. And there should be no place in any society, but especially in Bermuda society, for that.
Definitely. William or Christian?
Yes, and if I may as well, yes, I think in some way, some of the perceived perhaps strategic ambiguity on the parts of candidates too, in acknowledging too that this is a politically contentious topic for them, in somewhat straddling the fence in not being willing to express directly what their expressed position on the issue is. I did find it refreshing too to have Emily Gale Dill expressly say that yes, there should be apology out of the offensive remarks from the BIU President Chris Ferber. But as well, I would have liked to see some more clarification too, specifically from the FDM position on marriage equality and on legislating that too, as that has been a serious point of political contention too. And we now, as Bermuda, are recognized as the only country in the world that has ever legalized gay marriage and then repealed it again. And in terms of the optics for what this displays about our country and our values in terms of tolerance and loving our neighbors, it can reflect pretty poorly on us. So it is something that we should very carefully consider in our presentation of Bermuda's values to the world.
So going on the point of what Campbell mentioned with legislation and the fact that none of them brought it up about making it legal for people to get married, I think that sort of shows where people are. They want all four people are in the matter, and their public views at least.
I kind of want to piggyback on what William had brought up, because one thing that I thought was a bit lackluster was the fact that the FDM this late in the game, because they have been established since 2020, that they don't have a stance on same-sex marriage or just LGBTQI rights in general. I think we are in a day and age where that should kind of be an apparent standard. So I think that that's quite interesting and definitely quite telling that they don't have any form of a public stance or feeling on that topic, since it's a topic that we discuss quite at length.
Absolutely. Going to open the floor for any additional comments on this topic before we move on to the next topic that we discuss.
A last point I'll make on it, which was thankfully Mr. Lieutenant Bean's point, was that education and respect is key, and that I think goes across most of the issues that were discussed tonight.
Absolutely. Okay. We're going to move on to talk about the community building. And so we had a couple of questions about independence. We asked about feelings of togetherness and, those values, traditional family values, that piece came back in that conversation as well. Were there any reactions or just any questions or responses that you were surprised by that you think could have been, more substantive or something that you want to comment on?
Well, I'll go ahead and say I think there is a great deal of potential that is recognized in the constituency, certainly from the four candidates presented. And a question too, I think, at least was left in my mind as to, out of the slate of candidates, which of these candidates and which of these parties and their platform and support do you feel has the best vision for your constituency and your community? Which candidate is presenting ideas that everyone in C36 can work on together? Who is presenting actionable items that can be engaging for youth, seniors, for everyone in the constituency to have a piece in that shared project of building a better Bermuda and building a better C36. In terms of what was presented, I think there were some ideas here and there too, but would deeply as well like to see a greater and more focused response on what specific engagements can be levied to improve the community and the livelihoods of those in C36.
In regards to community building, I feel to show the case that all of them are open to decision, maybe they all host an event together to show community as a whole rather than focusing on the political views. Of course, they want to represent C36, but I feel that would bring a branch to allow for everybody to feel more community orientated.
I think that is a very interesting point. Taj, do you have any comments on this section?
No, I just to echo what I said before. It's like there's almost nothing to comment on because there was nothing presented besides principles and ideological stances, which have already been made clear in the press, the very little press that the candidates have done so far. Yeah, I think by-elections are local, and I'm obviously not in C36 or even in Bermuda, so I would be interested to know what the candidates are telling their constituents, their prospective constituents on the doorstep, because if it's similar to what we heard tonight, yeah.
Definitely. I 100% agree with you, Taj. Because even though they did have limited time to speak for each question, I think it was definitely one note throughout the whole entire time.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to move on to the next topic, which was the cost of the current economy, just economic growth in Bermuda. And I think all of the candidates kind of struggled in this section, and I've seen some of the comments on Twitter that have said, there were no responses. Everyone said we need to go back, check with the team, we need to figure it out. And so there's just this question, again, like Taj, you're saying, what are they telling the constituency members, and what is the plan? And, a lot of people on Twitter at least have expressed that they expected that question would be at least one that they would be prepared for. So going to open the floor for our youth panelists to respond to that section.
So just talking about it.
Go ahead.
Okay. So talking about housing, just on the off chance, I know unfortunately schools are being shut down, but if you want to focus on which Mark Bean was mentioning about making the sort of government more small or efficient, what we could do with these government buildings is turning them to housing, for which will allow for not everybody, but give an opportunity for people to reduce their overhead bills for that. I think we all focus also on Belco and how that is international. I think that's an unfortunate sort of out of the box genie. We can't really control that at the moment, but I think focusing unfortunately with this closing or potential closing of the school and get a silver lining out of that, I think that would definitely encourage some people.
Yeah, and I guess for me, just to echo what I've said previously, it was just lacking any substantial anything, and it's like there were no ideas. Like, and I understand that 2 minutes is no time to speak, or I don't know if there's a fear from the candidates that they may misspeak or misrepresent the values of their party. But certainly, the independent candidate could have provided some of his ideas without any repercussions in terms of party discipline, and so could have Mark Bean as the leader of the party. They could have presented anything, any idea. I think that's what people were looking for, some sort of idea as to how we can move forward with the cost of living. The government has mentioned that they will be doing a mid-budget review. That was something that the senator could have mentioned that the PLP is doing to support or to address the cost of living. That wasn't mentioned. The OBA candidate could have given their positions on cost of living, on the legislative bills that they have, the articles that they have written in the newspaper, several of their candidates around what could be done to cost of living. The information is out there. The ideas are out there. It just seems as if the candidates are, one, unaware of them, or two, afraid to present them as their ideas. And I just don't understand what that's about. Yeah, it just seems as if there's no independent thought because, as you mentioned, Haley, all of them said that they have to go back and discuss with the team. So where are your ideas as the representative for C36? You have to have your own ideas for how to represent your constituents, and there was none.
If I may, I do, when listening, of course, these discussions, I do, of course, like to take a few notes, of course, just to flag some particular ideas that I found interesting presented. There were a few ideas which were presented by the candidates on the question of cost of living decreases and levers that can be pulled. The PLP candidate, Reverend Emily, did present some ideas around reducing red tape on businesses and echoed too some of the ideas presented by Lieutenant Bean on apprenticeships, on vocational training, and on empowering and educating both youth and seniors to have a greater share in areas of community advancement that can potentially be levied. There would, of course, we would like to see a little bit more in terms of what specific industries potentially could be revitalized. In that regard, too, we did see a little bit out of in separate conversation and on other topics too, some ideas presented from Carl Neblett around cleaning up some of the roads and some of the infrastructure, and of course looking to on how C36 on the doorstep of Dockyard with the first gate of tourist revenue, how best can C36 benefit from the influx of cruise ship passengers in such a way that benefits the entire community and passes funds in such a way too that develops it. Again, however, would like to see a lot more clarity around what these mean. And of course, not having or presenting openly that there are no real ideas around reducing the cost of living because it's such a thorny issue doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in which candidate has a forward vision for Bermuda. And that too, I think I would like to say, even though I'm not a resident of C36, I would hope as well is part of what Bermudians are looking for in this next general election cycle. As what party, what individuals, what interested and engaged Bermudians are presenting visions for our collective futures and what that collective future looks like. We did have a pint as well from Mr. Mark Bean as well on reducing the size of government, as Christian touched on too. I would also say that we have a SAGE Commission report collecting dust, which was completed more than 10 years ago now, really getting into a lot of the nitty-gritty around where certain reductions could be made in government. And as well, I'd like to see a little bit more clarity from some of the parties on perhaps implementing some of those cost reductions, which could be levied. And more clarity too, as we had Ryan bring up the point earlier on the roots of issues. We'd like to see a lot more discussion around where the roots of cost of living issues come from.
I know for me, especially as a young voter, something that I am drawn to in a candidate is somebody that is empathetic to the struggles that, we as citizens of this country are feeling. And I really think that this was a missed opportunity for that, for especially for them to connect with their constituents, because the cost of living right now is something that is hurting every single person in this country. And I think the missed opportunity was with that question that we brought to the whole floor, which was what needs to be done to reduce the cost of living. And the answer was just like, oh, that question's too loaded. I don't really have an answer for it. Like I think that was a little bit lackluster. And I think that that could have been an opportunity for them to connect with us and say, like, I'm in the same boat as you. I got all these bills I got to pay. And, it's hurting me too. And if I become your constituent representative, this is something that I'm going to take serious in the House. That never happened. And I really think that that was a missed opportunity. And I would have loved to have seen them elaborate on it instead of glossing over the whole topic.
Yeah, and to add to that, RJ, I would have liked them to critique the government on what they're doing right now, like, and to make suggestions on what they can do better. The government has been doing work around cost of living that involves a minimum wage, that involves building more affordable housing, that involves doing the mid-budget review and what may come of that, allowing people to withdraw from the pension, etc., etc. The government has been doing things, right? That are open for critique. But none of the other candidates from the other parties or the independent candidate provided a critique or any other solution to what the government is doing right now to address cost of living and what they would do better. That's what I was looking for. And I think that's what people would be looking for, to say, here's what the government is doing and here's what we would do better. I heard none of that.
Definitely. No, I'm really interested to move into this next section, which was on climate change and sustainability. And I know that William and Christian will have some comments about that. Should we just discuss the elephant in the room with the Honorable Mark Bean's comments on climate change?
So I'm from Bermuda's Love, and I head up the environmental aspect of it with one of our main pillars. And I think he makes some points, which is factual, that the Earth does warm and cool, but the fact that it's cooling or saying heating up faster than it should be, I think he missed that point and missed the understanding of it. So I do bring concern from that, the fact that we are an island. And though we are small, we do contribute a lot through the fact of anytime any of us travel, we take a plane or we import stuff. So I do think that was a big concern for me as representation for the environment.
What about you, William?
Wow, Ajay, you're gonna have to bear with me if I talk over your time. And apologies too, as I am somewhat loaded in my expertise on this particular subject, working on climate change and working on climate change adaptation and mitigation for Bermuda. I feel this is crucially the most missed aspect and the biggest issue with the ideas we've had presented today, and two, the biggest issue with our confidence in our elected leaders' understanding of our future trajectories and therefore our present priorities. Climate change is at this point undisputed scientific fact. There is less than 1% of disagreement in scientific consensus around the world on its cause, and on its cause being, in recent times, yes, anthropogenic, that is human impact driven climate change on top of natural variability, as Mr. Bean spoke to. And that does occur primarily and predominantly through the burning of fossil fuels for our energy supply. And so, of course, the number one thing to do when you have a leak in the roof is to plug the hole and not just spend all of your time mopping it up. The number one thing we must do in this as a priority is reduce our reliance and our addiction to fossil fuels. And unfortunately, I am not very persuaded by the arguments around LNG, particularly because it only burns 20% cleaner than diesel oil. It is not a true green solution, and it bakes us into reliance on further fossil fuel development at a time when we need to be rapidly accelerating the deployment of further renewable energies which don't have carbon pollution associated with them. I think, once again, the chorus around education being necessary in this regard is most crucial. And I think the youth listeners to this panel, and as well anyone who has an educated understanding of climate impact in the environment, will also see that this is a big issue for us. To provide a small correction to Mr. Lieutenant Bean's comments on our carbon footprint being small. Yes, as an island nation, we contribute a small amount in the global scale, but each of our individual impacts through our reliance on imports and our reliance on fossil fuels means that we have a very large per capita contribution. And that unfortunately does mean that we have to take responsibility for our consumption, and we have to curtail where we are consuming more than other domiciles. That point hinges upon climate justice. The last thing I will say on this is that two last things I'll say on this is that I liked that Reverend Emily Gale Dill didn't say that education is key and that we need to be alert and to build solutions around that education, because that truly is what it does come down to. And I also did very much like that Mr. Neblett brought up our neighbor to the south in Barbados and Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who is one of the greatest world leaders for her moral stance and her pragmatic stance towards climate change and human development. And I would strongly suggest for all candidates in all political parties across Bermuda to deeply engage with Miss Mia Mottley's speeches and the content of her presentation and her imperatives for human development, because she too can seriously educate all of us.
I think for me, just once again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record probably all night. I think for me, it's we don't expect each individual MP to be a subject matter expert on every single issue. That is not what we expect. What we expect is a basic level of understanding of the core issues that Bermuda faces, that the constituency faces, that young people face, and that the future of Bermuda faces. When you have candidates that have no real solutions to one of the biggest issues of our time, I think that is significantly concerning. Or no knowledge, or no, maybe not knowledge, let's not say that. They did not present the ideas, the things that are currently going on, and how they would do better. Just once again, why was there no conversation around what the government is doing to address climate change, what the OBA's positions are on those items, what the FDM's position are on those items, what the independent coalition's ideas are on those items, and how they would do differently and how they would do better, and how, like, they don't have to know the ins and outs as well as Bill does about climate change, but they should have a basic understanding of the issues and how we could improve those issues. And it was just astounding that there was none of that, and it was disappointing.
I think disappointing is definitely an accurate word. We have some comments. So from Lana Tolbert, there was lots left out. Not sure if time of response limited some of the candidates. I really don't want to put the onus on our time constraints because they still could have had the opportunity to articulate, like what Taj has said in terms of discussing their party platforms or critiquing the government. And focusing more on addressing the topic as a whole in terms of policy and legislation. Um, I think for me, probably the most interesting question in this section was directed to the Honorable Mark Bean on his party's stance on the idea of climate change, which was like they don't subscribe to that. Now, just as we don't have to spend too much time on this question, but do you think that that stance is detrimental if um, if there is a potential FDM leadership?
In regards to the stance, yes, it's detrimental. I did note some comments in the World Gazette articles in regards to him being that he is the leader, and if he doesn't get elected into this position, being this constituency, that might have knock-on effects to other sort of members of his party running for other elections. And I feel his words saying with regards to what Campbell mentions, maybe lack of insight or willing to open up and listen, I think is an important aspect. Because I did notice quite a few of the people who were showing did admit, not just in this conversation, but other conversations or topics, that they weren't fully aware, and that gives an opportunity for them to become more educated in this area.
Thank you.
If I may briefly, I have to wholeheartedly agree with Christian that the idea of climate change being a political narrative in any way is extremely detrimental, not only to our future trajectory as a country and as a people and as human dwellers on this earth and with this earth, but it also does unfortunately reflect quite poorly on Mr. Bean's understanding of the priorities for the 21st century and human development. And as well, I feel, however, that there is immense opportunity for recourse and for education and to look at constructive solutions, and that many of the ideas that we are apparently searching for around how to reduce the cost of living do directly tie in with climate solutions and do directly tie in as well with how we build human and natural capital back up. The idea that climate change is being pushed as a narrative to curtail behaviors, there is understanding too of where these ideas come from, and that is because there is a motion to restrict the amount of natural resource that humankind is consuming. We do have to acknowledge that there is gross inequality too in the rates of consumption, and that does filter down through different subsections of society and through economic bands. And that too is a point that needs to be taken with some nuance. But as well, I absolutely welcome the opportunity to speak with any of the other candidates or any of the other members of any of the other political parties or any of the members of the community in Bermuda at large about the issues of climate change and the potential solutions. Christian has mentioned that he leads the Bermuda's Love environmental program. I lead the Bermuda's Love program on the right to food. We feel that these are two crucial areas that we have to address, and they are crucial climate solutions, and as well wrap up with our solutions as well for how to address the cost of living.
And to add to that, I think just to unpack a bit of what Mark said, he said that basically that it's climate change is the result of political maneuvering. Okay, fair. We understand that fossil fuel companies have humongous lobbying budgets that lobby governments. That occurs in Bermuda, 100%. Where are your solutions to curtail political influence from the fossil fuel industry? If you think that is the cause of the issue, then provide solutions to addressing that issue. And that's where my problem is. I don't have a problem with him having that ideological stance. Fine. But give me some solutions for how we curtail that political maneuvering and that the impact that it has on the climate. If you say that it's from political maneuvering, then you should say that we will ban lobbying. Like, come on, there are solutions. There are solutions here that seem so obvious that it's almost funny that they weren't mentioned.
So there was mentioned by Reverend Dill the fact that they do encourage for electric cars. But I did notice and talk to some business owners about electric motorbikes in Bermuda, and specifically, there's actually no tax breaks for it. So that's just an example of, let's say, cost and transportation. The fact that you have to buy an electric car, you can't get an electric bicycle, which, let's say, if you get a solar panel, which is a big upfront cost, but there used to be rebates by the government to reduce it, which my family was lucky enough to get use of before they were taken away. And then if you get an electric bike, that reduces your overall expenditure. Of course, there's a big upfront cost in the beginning, but however, banks have encouraged lower spending on electric vehicles.
As a last point on vehicles, driving an electric bike now, which I am very happy to do so, and is in fact saving me a lot of money on gas. It is, of course, encouraged that we do adopt first better public transportation options, as these are the most environmentally friendly options, and electrifying those as well is a good step. Electrifying the public buses was a good step too, but as well, the purchase of cars for our ministries as well has the opportunity to be first directed to the spaces where they will have the greatest impact. And really what we must do as well is ensure that it isn't just our ministers that are driving around in electric cars, but in fact that those who are working for the post services and those public and civil servants who have the most need for motor vehicles as well are recipients of those tools of the future, and that they too have the opportunity to reduce our total net consumption of fossil fuels as much as possible by encouraging the greenest alternatives. That is electrified public transportation, and that is again electrifying and improving the fleet of vehicles that we have to use for our day-to-day infrastructure needs.
Now, I would like to acknowledge this comment by Charles Jeffers. He says, the candidates seemed unprepared. Given this was the first time, hopefully the next one will have all candidates prepared for basic questions. And then another comment from Ryan Parentchief. The follow-up panel is working under the same time limits and has provided more depth than the candidates. Well done to BYC and the panelists. Well-researched, not afraid to take a stance is what we need. I think definitely. Omar Dill said that he did present a solution. I believe that's the comment to his stance on climate change.
Yeah.
Nicole Hassel says, I agree with Charles Jeffers. Everyone didn't seem prepared. No clarity for any of the questions asked. All right. I think we can move on. I think the next section was on education, and many of the questions were centered on school closures, on opportunities being pulled or lessons in the OBA government. But as a whole, what are you guys' thoughts on this section in terms education?
So I'm just gonna
go for it.
I'm just going to go about the elephant in the room. The focus on the education of this one was focused on the closure or potential closure of the schools. And other than that, there was no exactly specific policies that I can recall that they specifically focused on this, other than you had Mark Bean talking about decentralizing the school systems to allow more information as the power for people lower down who had better information control to understand it better. However, this policy from centralization of schools and shutting down schools has been going on for decades. So I think the reversal of this policy will take a long time before we see it.
Does anybody else have any thoughts?
Certainly do. And as well, one of the most crucial things I think that needs to be acknowledged too is no matter what does become of the schools in the final decision, the comments made by Lieutenant Bean on not allowing our school buildings to fall derelict must absolutely be taken into account. And we must absolutely look at these spaces as places where we can rebuild new forms of infrastructure and find new utilization for these for the benefit of those members of the constituency. I take on board the example too of C36, which absolutely needs to be looked at again in terms of what more we can do with that space and how best that can give back to the community in terms of being a space and a center for economic empowerment. That too, I think, was one of the most crucial aspects of it. I will as well say that there is some question too raised by Mark Bean that should be taken into account around educators having a more deeper engagement with how education is provided. But I think as well that too needs to be conducted with a whole of the community focus, and that needs to be taken on board with an idea around preparing Bermudian students and Bermudian adults too for the world in which we are living and are going to live in the future. There's a lot of opportunity, and education came up throughout the entire discussion. And as well, I'd like to hear a lot more from all the candidates on what education is most important for Bermuda to prepare us for the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo that, it was just disappointing to hear. And for me, and I mean, I've made this quite clear in some of the articles that I've written in the past, as one of the only public school graduates on this panel, I think it's very interesting that there was no real ideas. I still struggle with the lack of substantive ideas. I mean, I appreciate the idea around apprenticeships. I think that's very important around bringing back a trade kind of school for Bermudians, for young people and for adults. But I think there was just something lacking for me, and I'm not sure what it was, whether it was them really understanding the issue or what. But one thing that I always find is missing from this conversation is that they always talk about making sure educators are heard, but very rarely do you hear them talk about making sure that the voices of young people who have to go through this education are heard. There was no one mention that public school students should have a say in their education and what that looks like and how it should go. Nowhere in that entire conversation was that mentioned. Because when we're talking about education reform, let's be very clear, we're not talking about private school education reform. We're talking about public school education reform. And the people that go through public school, a majority of them are from have a lower socioeconomic status, tend to be mostly Bermudian, mostly people of color, etc., etc. And it feeds into the larger issues around gang violence, around cost of living. All of that affects education, and education affects that. And there was no real solution, no real ideas, just no hope even, really. And that was what was particularly stark for me, I think, on this particular conversation. And the idea that in nowhere was it mentioned that young people should have a say. For example, there's a board of education in Bermuda, and there's no representation for students on it. So how do you have people directing education that have never attended a public school, never taught in a public school, never principals of a public school, but yet have a say in how public education is driven? That seems very odd to me.
Thank you for bringing up those points, especially when it comes to advocating for our children and youth in this space. It is time for us to wrap it up. But before we go, I just wanted to give each of you the opportunity to not just give your closing remarks on the whole panel as a whole, but where you would like to see different initiatives like this go moving forward, and if we need to have more of these kinds of dialogues.
I'll go first quickly. So more or less, just to re-summarize, what I heard today was what I saw and heard today were ill-prepared candidates, biblical references, ideological pontifications, and no real tangible policy recommendations, and no real attentiveness to specific issues related to the constituency. I asked a question about a public members bill, a private members bill, and what policy areas it could address. The candidates, instead of answering the question, they focused on saying that the question was not a good question. It's a hypothetical question that has to do with the specifics of their constituency. If they were elected to their constituency, which we see in the US, we see in the UK, they're much larger jurisdictions, of course, but members bring specific pieces of legislation to benefit their community. That hasn't been a trend in Bermuda because Bermuda's so small. But these these potential MPs should have some idea of what the specific needs of their constituents are and how they would benefit them. And I heard none of that. So for me, it would be, I would encourage all four candidates to do more research and to better understand the needs of the community and develop positions on those needs as well. I think that is crucial. And to have an understanding of what the government is doing, what the government has done, what past governments have done, and how you would do it differently. That's I think what people are looking to hear, especially young people. I think that's what they want to hear from their candidates, and we're not getting it. But I think that speaks to a larger thing in Bermudian politics, which I've talked about extensively before, but I just think we could raise the level of political discourse. And I thank Ajay, Haley, Veronica, and Teray for their work in that area. But certainly there's a long way to go, as evidenced tonight.
Definitely.
I
What are
think
your
first,
closing? Oh, go ahead, William. I'm sorry.
I'll allow Tosh to close out before I say. Oh, okay. All right. Well, first of all, I again have to echo Taj right at the end there and say, yes, first off, extraordinarily large thank you to Bermuda Youth Connect for bringing these conversations to the forefront and for continuing their political advocacy on behalf of youth equity and the youth of Bermuda, and as well for drawing in a wider conversational piece for all of us here. I don't think that our audience is comprised of only youth, and I think that's a very, very good thing and goes a long way towards bridging the generational gap, which sometimes can present itself as a wedge between us in seeing that our collective futures here in Bermuda are bound to each other. So again, for sharing their views and for sharing their presentation, I have to thank the candidates as well for appearing tonight and for having the courage to speak to the wider Bermudian public on these issues in front of a televised forum. And as well, I hope that they will continue to engage in these forums and participate in further ones in the future. I think that this is a good model as well for Bermuda to have an understanding of the candidates that are in front of them, and that this political engagement and deepening it is a very good thing. So once again, thank you very much to everyone who has assisted in organizing this. As a brief closing remark, I will echo, yes, that I think the resounding chorus I heard from the candidates was that more education was needed, and I think that's true for not just our candidates and everyone here, but myself as well, and for everyone, all of us sharing the panel and the discussion too. But that too should be a collective endeavor and something that we look to as something that we participate in all together as a community in Bermuda. I think as well, a lot more education from all of us on our collective issues and how we can work together to solve them, and as well have comparison with other jurisdictions, as Taj brought up, can deeply illustrate and educate our collective response to the shared issues that we face. So once again, thank you to everyone for participating and for listening in, and looking forward again to continuing our political discourse long into the future.
Christian, what are your final thoughts?
So my final thoughts was, as again pointed out by Taj, the fact is it wasn't concrete information. I think we'll see how the four representatives do from the fact of feedback from, of course, our discussions themselves, as well as the comments, and see if when someone questions them, do they have new information that they've researched by getting feedback from us. as commentators in this discussion.
Well, thank you so much, Christian, Taj, and William, for participating in this debrief. It was a great discussion and really appreciate your contribution. Likewise to our candidates who joined us earlier, thank you again for participating in that discussion. I think it was fruitful and a great opportunity for the constituencies, members of the constituency 36, to hear from all of you, your views. And then once again, thank you to the Daily Hour for giving us this platform to share and make all of these conversations accessible to the people of Bermuda. To our viewers, thank you so much for watching and staying with us. I know we have been on for a while. I'm feeling the effects of that myself, but as a reminder, the election for constituency 36 is on October 4th. Again, encourage you all to go out and vote. You know, your vote is your voice. And I hope that this conversation, both the panel previously with the candidates and this youth debrief discussion that we've had, has provided with you all some insight on the candidates and on their views, and given you some more information to go into that voting booth more informed. So thank you all again, and good night.
Have a good evening.